You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Hello, awakening souls. Welcome to the last episode of Season 2 of Lighthouse Conversations. I've been away for a couple of weeks, dealing with some personal things, and I did miss you all, so I'm back, albeit for, one episode before I set Season 2 of this show to bed. I can't thank you enough for all you've done being here during this Season 2. There's been an incredible amount of wisdom and knowledge and just I'm so humbled for the fact that people would come on this show and share their most personal stories of awakening and growth, and be willing to share that with you, my listeners, to provide you with community and inspiration and hope. And I truly do hope it's providing those things for you. I will be continuing to work on my blog, Live Your Best Light, and you can find that at chellycanales.com/blog. I'd love to have you come check me out there. I find that as a spiritual person, I find myself wanting to float in the clouds a lot, but it's important to remember that we are spiritual beings, but we are living a human experience, and there are ways to really be present here and to take it on and to not, just live in a space where it's all sparkles and rainbows and butterflies. Like there's, work to be done. There's ways we can take care of ourselves to fill our cup in order to help others and help the world. So, there's a beautiful array of things out there I want to share with you. So please stay tuned. Speaking of amazing ways to keep your cup filled, I can't wait to introduce you to my next guest, Christine Arylo. She is the author of Overwhelmed and Over It. And I don't know about you, but for me, the holidays tend to have that kind of overwhelmed and over it feeling to it. But it was a book written pre-pandemic, and it's even more perfectly timed for right now. She has some really great advice on how to hold that space for yourself, of embracing the feminine side of being in the workplace, of embracing what she calls a slow start day. Can you imagine just taking a bath on a Monday afternoon? Why not? So stick with me as we have this conversation. I'm just really grateful to have had the time with Christine, and it's just a great reminder. You've got to look after yourself. No one's going to do it for you. You have the right to say no to certain things, and to remember that we have to exercise our receiving muscle in order to really appreciate and fully be in this experience we call life. I hope you have great holidays. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. And welcome to the show, Christine. How are you?
I'm good. So good to be here. I can't wait to dive in.
Ooh, dive in. And I was just thinking about water because you just showed me on your computer the beautiful view from your home. You've got this lovely water around you all the time. So we can dive in, to our conversation, but also, have you had a chance to dive into the water? Is it way too cold? Like, has it been too cold for a long time?
Oh, yeah. No, I live off the coast of Seattle. You go into that water, not only are you going to freeze, you're going to have jellyfish stuck.
Oh, forget I said.
So you can kayak on it. There are brave people who paddleboard on it, lots of boats. But for me as a writer, this is like a writer's haven.
Retreat. Oh, and I love that you said haven. Lighthouse Haven is my company. And I feel like there's something about that nurturing quality that allows you to activate and bring your gifts to the surface, if you will, with more of these water metaphors. I don't know what I'm doing with that, but here we go.
Well, the water, it's interesting because water is the feminine. So it's the element that is connected to the feminine. It's the element that's connected to our intuition. It's the element that in our world has been completely not valued. And it's it's part of the crisis that we're in right now. It's interesting. A lot of people have said the next war that gets fought will be about water. And I think it's actually about, it's about the feminine, and it's about what that really means. And it's about coming back to a way of life where we feel nourished and nurtured. You can live without food for, I don't know, for a long time,
Right.
but like water, if you don't have water, it's like 3 days and like,
You're
something, dead. And so I think that's part of what we're experiencing right now. And the slowdown is the element of water. Because even though I'm looking at the Puget Sound right now, it looks very still on top. There's like all this movement and all this current that's moving underneath it. Which is, we have lots to talk about because
so much. 'Cause you're speaking right to my heart. I mean, the flow and the invalidation of the way that we're organically meant to work is so in contrast with the system that's in place, and how we feel like we can never quite have the energy to do it, or to do it well, or to reach our potentials, or please everybody. So there's so much to dive into there. Here we go again. But I just want to start with your story. You have an incredible history. You've written more than one book. You work with women online and all over the world. I just want to hear how you got to where you are today.
I think the thing, so I grew up in Chicago. That's where I grew up, just kind of dropped right into Middle Earth, and grew up in, just like a very normal way of like, not, just like you do the thing, you go to the school, you get the thing, you get the job, this like sometimes it's called the American dream. I've since come to call it the escalator to death, where you're just going. And I was born in a place where a lot of the people around me, my two best friends were pregnant by the time they were 15. A lot of my friends that I grew up on the south side of Chicago went to jail. I had a part of myself that knew I needed to get out of there. And so I became a very high achiever, not to please anybody else, but almost like a protection mechanism for myself. It's one of my 5 inner mean girls. I have 5 inner mean girls. This is my achievement chunky. and her name is Move the Bar Belinda. And she's like that mountain climber who like gets to the top of the mountain, is like, you got to keep going to the next mountain. Or she's like the pole jumper where like they set the bar and it's a really high bar and like you're just about to clear it. And then, she points it up a little bit and be like, that's it. That's all you got. And so that pattern of being a high achiever, which got me into grad school at Northwestern and, helped me excel very quickly in my career, was a defense mechanism to get me out of the south side of Chicago and help me, really live my soul's path. But that part of me, like all of us, we have these deep parts of ourselves that create these deep imprints that drive us to work, strive, grind harder than we actually have to, because we're like literally like in an unconscious survival mode. And in corporate America, I could kind of, I got so rewarded, when I was in corporate, and and when I consulted, that it was just, I would just, I was going along. But I left my corporate career in 2006 to write my first book, Choosing Me Before We. And I was about 6 months into being an entrepreneur when I had my first superwoman sob moment. And maybe you've had one of these.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
And it's that moment, you all, I'm sure a lot of people's heads will be nodding, where the pressure is so much that the tears, just like a keg that's been tapped, right? It's just like start to run, and the despair. And so I'm sitting in my office and I have all the vision boards up and Oprah's on it, and like all these things. And I'm like, I am a published author at this time. Like my book has been accepted. It hasn't come out yet. So all these like success milestones, and like, no matter how hard I'm working, there's not enough. There's not enough money. There's not enough time. There's not enough of me. And I was sitting there and I just had this, after the superwoman sob moment happened, I had this moment of like silence, like kind of after the storm, hits. Have you ever had that? Like, you go like, and then it gets calm. Water metaphor again. So storm. And then that calm. And that's when your inner wisdom will speak to you if you're listening. And the voice said to me, you need the feminine. And if you keep trying to work this way and succeed this way and go, after your mission this way, you're not going to make it. Not only are you not going to be successful and be able to achieve what you want to achieve, you're going to get sick and you're not going to have the resources or the life force. And when that voice said, you need the feminine, I was like, true. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I had no idea, but I said, okay, yes, I need that. And that began the journey that we are at now, which has led me in the last 15 years or so to really bring in what was called a wisdom tradition and marry it with my traditional training to actually find new ways to live and lead in a more sustainable way. And I'm a work in progress.
As we all
a
are.
work in progress.
There's this common misconception, and I deal with this too. It's like, if I'm not perfect, I don't have it all together, I have no right to teach other people do it. I think it's the people who've been through it, who are going through it, who have that wisdom and perspective, who can truly speak from a place of authenticity and can hold space for other people going through it. I feel like that's a requirement of the job, to be a work in progress.
Yeah, and it's because it's like this is one of my favorite metaphors about us as women, is that we have the power to weave and birth the new worlds.
Yes.
We are the ones, like we are the co-creators of the universe. Like we get to create a reality. Most of us didn't know that because that's not the training we got. We're like, go out into the world, you can do, be, and have it all, but then society defines what all is. And then if you work within any system, and basically we're all trapped in systems, we just don't see it, that are kind of totally screwing with our self-worth and our sense of scarcity and are we okay? Do I have enough? Like this whole play we see playing out in humanity is like a big game of scarcity and fear. And how can we get everybody just swirled up and whirled up? And from that place, you're operating from your like fight and flight all the time.
And that depletes your resources. So quickly. It depletes your resources so quickly. And you talk in the book about how it's, the giving, and then like not accepting the receiving in the way we need to in order to keep giving. It's like, here you go, here you go, here you go. But where's that part of you that is that needs to be nurtured and fed, and not just like, hey girl, go have a bubble bath, which you should anyway. But it's so much more than that. And you definitely, you get into that. So if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, I think two things. One, just to kind of come back around to this part of that, we've been really trained to like think, if I just get the next self-care strategy, if I just learn how to manage time better, if I manage my stress better. First of all, you don't want to manage stress because stress isn't something you want. So why would you manage it? Right? You can't find more time. Time's not lost. You can't make more time. There is no time kitchen. So you're focused on time. There's only 24/7 in a day. And self-care has become like Kleenex. It's like, like that thing, like pamper yourself, take a bath. And what's happening is we are given all these strategies to basically keep our head above the water. Right. That's what's been happening. We've been treading water, let's be honest, you all, for years and decades. For decades, women and people, humans have just been putting more on. We put more on, we put more on. We work harder, we work more. I remember reading in Fast Company about 5 years ago, I wanted to scream like into somewhere it was a cover. And it had a person sitting at the desk, and they were lauding this company because they had decided to start feeding their employees dinner and allowing their families to come and have dinner with them.
Wow.
And I was like, does anyone else see what's going on here? Like that's effed up. That is what is valued as success.
Like, stay there. We will keep you by any means possible type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then your family, like, you should be home. Right. And it's the same thing with you from an entrepreneur perspective of like, how many side hustles do you have? I got this side hustle and that side hustle. And I'm like, everybody take that word hustle out of your, know, and get rid of it. It's like, we don't even realize that we're imprinted and we're playing a game that isn't set up for us to actually win.
Yeah. This programming is deep. And first of all, I don't want to knock bubble baths because it truly is a part of my health and wellness ritual that I rely on. However, it's the systemic stuff that we're not addressing. Like, why do we feel like we need all of these things, just to, like you said, to keep us above water, when there's so much wrong with the way that our system is. And before we dive into the book, I just kind of want to talk about, I left my career, about 2 years ago now, working in a nonprofit. And it was like this nonstop grinding, nonstop wheel turning. And when you're in a position not of huge power or whatnot, it's like you are the catch-all for a lot of things, and you want to keep striving and doing and giving more and giving more, but there will never be enough you can give. There will never be enough that will be accepted of what you're giving. And so what does that look like? I guess I won't ever really be successful because I won't reach that point. So I want to talk about this. And actually, as the pandemic has happened and I've seen things shift in the workplace, being more home-based and whatnot, it just has become even more apparent that those feminine qualities, the flow, the intuition, the heart, using our heart power, our energy to create, and also existing in the cycles of how naturally we're meant to operate versus how the system wants you to operate. These things are coming to the surface very deeply. So this book, Overwhelmed and Over It, Embrace Your Power to Stay Centered and Sustained in a Chaotic World, could not have come at a better time. So talk to me a little bit about, first of all, like when you were writing this book, it was a very different time than it is now. But what are your thoughts releasing it at this time and how these things can apply to what your, original intent for women in the workplace was?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to the bath for 1 second.
Yes.
The water thing. It's not, so baths are actually one of the most supportive things you can do for your nervous system.
Yes.
And it's the pampering part of it. I'm going to take a bubble bath, right? It's like, no, actually you need to take a bath because when you get into the bath and if you put good oils in there and you put good salt in there, not the poopy stuff that's full of a bunch of toxins, it decompresses and stabilizes and neutralizes your nervous system, and it clears your energetic field.
It does.
Big part, like, this, right?
I know this. Yeah.
And this is a big part of my work. And actually the whole second section of the book is called Liberate Your Life Force. And there's a lot of yogic science in there that I share yogic wisdom about, like, your magnetic field and your energetic field and how we have 10 bodies, not just a physical body. And the last place that disease shows up is in the physical body. And so it's not like, I didn't have any classes on like strengthen your nervous system, clear your energy field. It's like, oh yeah, I got time for that. Or that sounds a little corny. It's like, actually, not. I do a lot of wellness and other kinds of coaching for organizations. And what I keep hearing from so many people, and the first practice I give them is how they're starting their day and how they're ending their day. Call it bookending the day.
Yes.
So that first hour of what you ingest and what you put into your body determines the frequency and the pace and the reality of the rest of your day. So if you're letting all the outside world in, going to TV, looking at the email, putting on the news, whatever, you're going to go into the world that day like a windsock with no pole.
That's right.
You're not connected to yourself, or the outside world's frenzy is going to go into your own angst and anxiety. And that's why we're seeing all this uptick in depression and anxiety, and like they just want to throw pills at it. And it's like, my hope is to help us get to the root of what's actually happening. And then you got to just embrace, like, if you do not have a morning ritual that connects you physically to the universe, also to yourself, to like things that keep you stable and centered, and you're not keeping your field clear for that first hour, I don't know how to keep you out of overwhelm. I don't know how to keep you focused. I don't know how to, like, you want to be successful, change the first hour of your day. And I love that you're a bath person. I'm a big, and here we go with the water again, but this is one of my favorite things that I do. It's called the slow start day. I especially love doing them on Mondays, but I often do them on Wednesdays to create a different rhythm for the week. So instead of Wednesday being hump day or just pushing through the week, you do something like take a bath. And I remember the first time I learned about these slow start Mondays, I was working on my second book about self-love, and I called my friend Shiloh. It was a Monday morning. I'm like, what are you doing, Shiloh? And she's like, I'm taking a bath. And I'm like, it's Monday morning. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you can take a bath on Monday morning, and like, I've been taking baths in the afternoon, like at 2:00, I'll if I feel like a lot of stress or I just need to slow down. I'm like, I'm just going to go take a bath. And this is part of the piece that you're exactly right. And why I wrote this book. I wrote this book. I didn't know I was writing for the future. So I started writing this book 3 years ago. I've been researching it and living it for 10. And I didn't want to write this book first. I wanted to write my next book first. But I was like, the universe was very clear, like, this is the book to write. So I'm finishing the last edits as the pandemic breaks out in the United States. And I'm like, oh my God, they might actually believe me. They might believe me that we can work differently. Because for years I've been teaching this, and some of the people who get it, right? They like you get it, like people, many of you that are listening, we get it. But still, it's like we're so busy just trying to survive and just trying to get to that place where we feel like we have enough or we've made it, that we will poo-poo or not do the practices that keep us in the flow state. And it really does break down to some pretty specific perspective shifts. Yes. And putting very practical practices and structures into your life that help you create a rhythm that is how the natural world works, with ebbs and flows, days, nights, and seasons.
And what I love about this, and is also kind of confusing about this, is that we need to go back to ancient practices in order to be modern women. This is my belief anyway. And like you say, if we're in the cycles, if we're in the rhythm of things, we can be that much more productive and we can be healthier overall. I feel like every company needs to have a chief wellness officer. We need to have, this is meditation time. Here's a nap room. These are ways to support the whole person and not just the doing, going, whatever it takes to get that finished product done. So talk to me a little bit about how those ancient practices or ways of being have influenced your current work.
Well, I mean, they're core to it, I think. I started diving into all of these ancient wisdom practices in 2001. 2006 is when I found the feminine, but I've been doing yoga and meditating since 2001. And I used to fall asleep. I might drool on myself when I first started. Like, I had a very active mind, and I was not like, I told you, I was born in Chicago. It wasn't like I was born on some ashram in California. Like, I had to I had to remember and revalue these things. And this is the piece and why, when I wrote Overwhelmed and Over It, I identified these 12 imprints that we have running within us, because while there are all these systemic reasons why we can't get out of burnout, it's actually ourselves, these self-induced pressures and imprints that don't allow us to trust. If I slow down and I give myself space. So one of my practices I've been doing every week for over 3 years is my Saturday Sabbath, and no work, no computer, no electronics. I mean, I can text, that's it. And I'm not allowed to think on that day. No thinking, no strategizing, no nothing. When I don't take that space day for myself, and there's plenty of things always to do, I am not as good of a human, emotionally and mentally. My partner would tell you the same exact thing. And I actually, how you do something, you think you have to do it, and you put all this energy into it, and then it like either doesn't manifest, or it's like it just took way longer than you thought it would. And if you create space, how like magic, like things can come in, you can
just drops in. Yeah.
You drop in. So like this last week, this last week, I was like, I don't know, like always, I don't have time. I don't have time to take my Sabbath. And I'm like, but I know I have the space to take it. So I take the space, and 3 people, because I have my fall enrollment happening for a couple different trainings I'm doing, and 3 people just come floating right in, right? Because the space is there. And this is this piece of, like, I call it the superpower of creating space and allowing the universe. We don't trust the universe is part of it.
That's big.
And I'm a card-carrying member in the Impatience Club. I tear it up all the time, right? And we put these, I call it toxic time pressure. We put this toxic time pressure on ourselves. And then, I've been teaching online for a long time, since 2009. And I used to suffer from what I call email Tourette's, which is, I gotta send an email. I hate sending emails. I love connecting to people, but if I could just hit a little button and send you all like a 3-minute voicemail, which is why I podcast too, why I started Feminine Power Time. I'm like, I love this and talking to you, but to write an email takes 3 hours. It's like a 3-hour situation. And it's I'm like, we need a different system. Can we just learn how to telepathically communicate and just,
it's going to happen. You just wait. You just wait. There will be ways. And this is the closest we can get in the meantime is doing this, like looking at each other while we're having this conversation, across the country. But it's also very impersonal with the emails because tone and, a little wink or, the things that we do to communicate our feelings kind of get lost in the shuffle. So yeah, it's kind of more of a chore than anything else. But at least there is a way to communicate. I think about years ago when other pandemics happened, they didn't have the benefit of getting to do what we're doing right now.
It's true, but I think it's the piece that I would say, just to make this practical for everybody. A question for all of you is to take a step back. This is like the time to take a step back. We're taping this at the end of the year. We'll be dropping into the end of the year.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. It'll be in November.
Okay. So this is what's called the Kiva time. And November 1st through February 1st. And that's like, you think of the Pueblo Indians who go down into their kivas, right? It's a time that we're in the Northern Hemisphere, things start to slow down because it's like we're pulling in and leaves are falling off the trees. They're not dead, they're dormant. Bears don't just go to sleep when they hibernate. They're actually still doing many things, but on the inner realms. And then this is, I believe, one of the reasons why the pandemic is still going to continue, because we haven't gotten the lesson as humans. If the pandemic was lifted, everybody would be at Pottery Barn tomorrow, where they're throwing up Christmas. This is always what I say. And there's like the consumerism that we are not even aware that we are participating in, that is killing this planet, has to stop. And sometimes you can't break a pattern or break a habit without like a hard stop, kind of like going cold turkey.
Right.
So if you think about what you normally do during the holidays and the things that you've done that actually drain you, that actually are not sustaining you, and how we speed up, got to go to these parties, got to travel, got to get on airplanes, got to do this, got to go that, got to get to the, like all of it is completely against how the natural cycle works. And we should be slowing down. And yeah, it's a time for connection, but it's a time for like meaningful connection, like connect with a few, not with everybody. And what happens in our culture, because we're such a push, drive, hard culture, especially in America, we don't have like the holiday. In Europe, right? We these like 1 week, 2 week things, which is not enough for your nervous system to reset. People go nutso at the end of the year. We go nutso because to make up for the lack of space and feeling nurtured and nourished, because we've been driving to the end, and then we try to get it all in, in a couple weeks. So this is an opportunity for all of us to be like, well, how do I want to complete this year so that I end the year and I go into the new year feeling like there's some space in there. And I've been talking to so many people who are like, I took the corporate coaching. They come to the calls and they're like, I just don't feel motivated. Can you help me feel more motivated? And then we get down to it. They're freaking tired and they feel bad because they feel like they should be working all the time. And I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay to slow down.
Those are the programs that are running so deep in our systems. And the pressure that we can put on ourselves, like, I got to do it. I got to achieve. I have to have, no one is like, I mean, in some cases they might be, but not everyone is exposed to someone barking in the ear. It must be done. You have to overdo it. You have to give more. You have to. That's something we keep doing to ourselves. And I talk to people about this all the time. And I said, like, who told you you had to do that? No one. I just feel like I should. And you're driving yourself crazy over this. You're depleting all of your sources for something that may get done a day later, and that's okay. Like, there's no actual, finger pointing at you saying it must be this, it must be this. And so why do you think we are so programmed? Why do we do this to ourselves?
Oh, this is where we get to go. We're going to dive in. We're going to dive in deep.
Dive in. Yeah. It's like all jellyfish and all.
When I wrote Overwhelmed and Over It, I was really committed to writing a book that actually had the potential to free people from the patterns of self-sacrifice and burnout and overwhelm, for realsio. And it isn't that you're not ever going to go there again. Like, I step on the line of overwhelm. I've even put a couple toes over to the other side, but I know I pull it back pretty quick and I get realigned. And ever, and I don't burn out. Like, I mean, I get close to passion burnout. That can happen to me, but physical burnout does not happen. But passion burnout can still happen to me for sure. It's one of the 8 kinds of burnout, because I love what I do, but I want to do it. I want to help the world, And so this is the piece of the middle part of the book is liberate your heart. And I put the heart in the middle because we got to talk about the heart. And I got my hands on my heart, because we're fine with like, having a little conversation about overwhelm. This is one of the root reasons why we're still stuck in overwhelm. We've been talking about burnout, work-life balance for a long time, 60 plus years. Part of the reason is because we're okay with the mental part. We'll talk about it, but to actually go into the deeper parts in you, which is where the fear lives, where the guilt lives, where the shame lives, where all that stuff that we don't want to look at actually lives, that causes you to overgive to your relationships, to your work, and also set up a life design with your health and your wealth and your home that actually isn't sustainable. And you got to go in there and learn what I call your overgiving imprints are. And you're familiar, right? We all have them, right? And so it's like one of my practices. So I've identified 13, and every year at the beginning of the year, as part of the visioning process that I take people through, and I go through myself, we choose one over that we are going to get into harmony and get our giving and our receiving into harmony. And you got to work it all year. So the first stage of transformation is awareness. You can't change what you can't see. The second stage is reflection, where you do the jackass thing or the self-sabotaging thing. And then you're like, oh, look, I did it. And then the third stage is change in the moment, where you're able to feel that in your body or in your emotions. You're able to slow down and you're able to make a change. And then stage 4 is integration. And that's where the new elevated imprint comes in. So mine this year was overstretching or overextending, which means like overextending my life force, my time, my resources to try to make something happen. Very easy to do with a book release. I've done it in my last 3 books. And I made a promise to myself, I will not overextend my financial resources, my time resources, my support resources, or my money resources during a pandemic. When lots of my friends were taking these big loans and they were taking this loan and that loan. And I was like, no, I will not go into debt. And I also will not try to make everything happen. But I have to I'll be honest with you, it pushed me to my edge. And this is what it does when you kind of say, okay, I'm going to work this over, because all of my own fear, like if I don't take a loan for $10,000 to get my website up and to get this done and to hire a publicist and all this stuff, this book won't, make it, or I won't make it, or I'll be left behind. That's one of my inner mean girl's favorites. She's like, you're going to be left behind. You're going to be left behind. And I keep telling her, no, we're in the future. We're ahead of everybody. So I had to be with that feeling of like that. And that's the part we don't want to be with, but that's actually that's where the freedom is. And I, a lot of, and I, last year, the year before that, mine was over stretching. And this is where I would, with my staff, I would I would promise them more money so that they would have enough, but then I wouldn't have enough.
Yes.
And I found in there this deep pattern of over responsibility and over caretaking. And I couldn't even do it. I wanted to do a program because I wanted to help people with these practices. And, because I have it's over responsibility. If people don't have this wisdom, they're not going to make it through this time.
Right.
Right. But which is true. But does that mean that it's me that has to do all of it? No. And I don't mean it from some Atlas complex, but I mean more we have these huge hearts that want to help people. And so we take over responsibility. And this is where you have to look at your own life and see where you're taking too much responsibility on.
You are speaking
no more.
Yes. I have sticky notes of this is my mission statement: to change the consciousness of the world, to help shift this major transit. You're you can't save the whole world, but I feel really bad when I can't, or why can't I do it fast enough? So I feel like that's a program that many of us have. And by giving to our families, by giving to our coworkers, by giving to the world so much, you talk about a bankruptcy that happens. Can you speak a little bit about about what that looks like and how, so maybe some techniques to help prevent it and then to help heal ourselves and refill those stores?
Yeah. Can I give you, I'll answer that. And then can I share with you one of the top 3 practices? Can I teach it all to
Yes,
you?
I would love that.
That I do every day. And then it's the top 3 practices that has kept me out of burnout for 8 years. Okay. So here's the deal. Think of yourself like a bank. And if you are a bank that only gives withdrawals and doesn't take in deposits or doesn't take in more deposits than they do withdrawals, what's going to happen to you?
Gotta go
bankrupt, right? And so bankruptcy is emotional. It is financial. Some people do financially bankrupt themselves. I mean, look at credit card debt, right? It's like that. It's emotional. It's all of those different kinds, which is where the overs can help you actually understand your kind of overgiving. And so the old imprint is it's better to give than receive. It's better to give than receive. We've all heard that. Sounds like big deal, but just think about that. If it's better to give than receive, and that imprint is in you and it's operating in your unconscious, this makes sense for like if someone gives you something, why you feel like I have to give back. How we can't just receive without feeling like we have to do something in return.
Right.
Have you ever had this experience, right?
My whole life. And then
right?
Just think, oh, if no one receives, no one's gracious in receiving, then why are we giving? It's a weird thing. It's
the program. And so we've been programmed, especially as women, to believe that strong women achieve. So we were strong achievers and we're selfless caregivers, but we are not taught how to be generous, graceful receivers. And we shouldn't even be selfless caregivers. Like that's part of the whole problem. It's like the selfless part. And like we take everybody's stuff on. This is part of what's happening, like, especially with working mothers, what we're seeing right now about how they're just like completely like, in a puddle, because the truth was it was overwhelming before. And we women, and this came from a very personal conversation I had with Gloria Steinem a couple of years back when I was trying to get to the root of this stuff. What came up is like, we've just been putting more and more and more on, because the systems didn't change to support women to make choices. And this is why we see this thing like, oh, you have to take a mommy break. So I'm going to go behind in my career, because the whole freaking thing is not rigged for the fact that people have families and children, parenting and mothering is our work. I mean, it's sacred work in the world. I mean, it's got to slot it in on the side
right.
So that whole podcast for a different conversation. But the reason I'm saying that is I just want everyone to know it's not your fault, and what we're experiencing and seeing. And it's not just happening, of course, to working mothers. It's just that's getting more piled on, but it's just like, it's too much. There's no more room. So what I'm inviting women to say and to look around at your life and be like, no more. And this is my challenge to everybody at the end of this year as we go into the new year. Look around your life and say, what is no longer sustainable? And like what you've created, and also what's just no longer sustainable of what you've accepted and assimilated as a way to work and live, and be like, and wake up to it, and be like, wow, why do we do it that way? Why do we do it that way? And if you can take that stand for no more, then as we go into the next year, we can start to see, we have to heal our own parts in it, but then we can start to see how to do things differently. But we can't create the new world in new ways if we're drained, if we're burned out. And this is what we see with, so many people like, that are listening, you and I, like we have such good meaning, but we're like, we'll exhaust ourselves. And this is a long game. It's not a sprint. It's not a marathon. I say it's like Bilbo's grand adventure. So we need to really make sure you're taking in the deposits that you need, not just with green drinks and eating healthy food, actually on all levels, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So I can teach you, I'll pause because that was kind of a lot, but I'll pause. And then I'd be happy to end us with the practice. That
I would absolutely love that. And I just also want to mention that, if you're doing the time to like take, read the book, do the work, part of what's going to happen too is that the people around you are going to behave differently towards you, or they're going to have to shift. That's difficult sometimes. You might lose people if you start to take your boundaries and your ownership of yourself and saying, I'm not doing that anymore. How is the best way to handle situations like that when people are used to being overgiving?
Yeah, it's I wrote about it in the book, and I basically said, expect resistance from yourself, and expect resistance from people around you. Because especially if they're benefiting from your overgiving, they're going to actually have to go take responsibility. Or the system itself, one of the things I uncovered is basically the systems will take as much as you will give it, and then it will keep taking more until there's nothing left of you. And then you're like a goldfish who's basically, taken out of the tank, and you're dead belly up, and they flush you down the toilet, and they put another goldfish
in another one. Yeah.
Pop in another one. It's like you were never even there.
And that hurts on a soul level when you've given so much, you've dedicated your heart and your life. And I just wanted to make that that point, because it's really a devastating feeling to be devalued like that when you've given so much.
Yeah, well, and it's a part of this is why the subtitle is Embrace Your Power, because it's about, this is the perfect time. Take a step back and look at your life. What are you giving your life force to? Does it have meaning to you? Is it what your heart desires? Are you living the lifestyle you want to live? And I don't mean a mansion on a hill with no financial stress. I mean, we've designed unsustainable lives. And the first part of change is awareness and acceptance.
Yes, yes.
And the structures are breaking down, which is great, because that means that this is exactly the time to be able to say what's not working. And I really believe if every woman could see what was actually happening around her, and she looked around her family and herself, and she's like, no more, we all just quit. We would figure it out. Give us 1 year, and this whole world would be different, if we could come together around what really matters, which is wholeness and wellness and interconnection and humanity. And part of what we're seeing happen is this divisiveness that's happening right now is not unintentional, because if women really came together about what all women, and really I believe good humans, care about, which is life and love and people having what they need to just their basic needs taken care of. I mean, we should not have a world in which people are living in tents on the street because they can't afford the rent in the city, right? This is not how it should be. And so we're not so different, but the systems, the media, the politics, all of it, it creates these what are called duality realities that pulls people apart and gets people fighting with each other. And then you're taking in all that media, and then it goes into your subconscious, and you start to believe the stories that you're being fed, which actually aren't true. And so this piece of slowing down and getting in touch with the natural rhythm, I think the universe moved me here on this island because I literally watched the flow go out. I watched the ebb and flow. I watched the sun come up, the moon go down. It's getting that trust in my own body. And I don't watch television. I don't watch the news. I got to deal with the universe. Tell me what I need to know when I need to know it. And so I happen to be married to someone who loves podcasts. So he listens to podcasts all the time. He's like, Christine, you need to know this, and you need to know that, and you need to know this, and it's I'm really conscious about what I put into my psyche. And that allows me to hear my connection to the divine, to wisdom, my intuition so much more clearly. And I'm engaged in the world. I'm just not going to participate in the mishigash. I love that word, mishigash. One of my Jewish clients told me I could use it. So I'm like, I love it. I'm embracing it. But this is the piece of the wisdom. I mean, we have the wisdom within us. And when I was talking to Gloria Steinem and other women around that, about what happened, why was there this rising that happened, not just for women's movement, but also for equal rights. There was a rising, and they said it was the fighting, women and women, Black and white, that just, it broke the energy. And so I feel like we're at this time of a rising where we have to be really aware of what's trying to divide us and not participate in things that create divisiveness. It doesn't mean we're not fierce in our voice. It means that we put that wholeness and that wellness and that sustainability in the core, and we start with our own lives. Because that's the deal. Be the change you wish to see. You got to start with your own life.
That's so true. And you have a lot of great wisdom in this book, and you have great exercises as well, where you have different diagrams as well, because, people absorb information in different ways. So I like that you have the visual component as well as, the text. And do you want to talk about that at all? Why you included?
Yeah, it's called visual thinking. So I use visual thinking because it shows metaphor and symbol and image that goes deeper into our subconscious and into all parts of our brain to open up extra portals of consciousness. So when people look at some of those glyphs, like there's this great glyph of what cracks me up of the work-life balance, like, which is a complete ridiculous equation and should never be tried. And it's this woman who's like wearing a suit and he has like a tug a rope, and works on one side and life is on the other and she's sweating. And you're just like, oh, look, there's a duality reality, work, life, work, life, work, life, right? And now the big thing is, work-life integration. I'm like, no, you don't have two parts of your life. It's not work and life. We actually, that whole duality reality, we need constellations. And in the book, next to that, there's a woman standing in the center of, I'm wearing an evening gown, and around her are these 8 spirals, which are the 8 realms of a whole life. And she's in the center as the conductor. And when you look at the shape of your life, like a circle that you're in the middle of, versus a tug of war where you have life, it's like everything other than work, and work, it like does something to your brain because it reconstellates the shape of your life and how you see things. And you literally can't, it's like you can't, if you're always in the duality, it's a line. You can't, there's no space to create a different reality. And so I know that sounds kind of esoteric, but it is, it's really powerful. This is why I'm like, this is what you're saying. This is the ancient wisdom, right? And so I take it, put it in visual so we can see it. And you start to see, oh yeah, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do that?
Ooh, and yes, working through this, working through the exercises, integrating the information, this is how we create that systemic change that needs to happen. And so with each of us taking our own responsibility, it's like one step closer to realizing that the system is broken and shifting so we can survive and also thrive. So would you be willing to walk us through that exercise you mentioned earlier that you do every day that would be really beneficial for the rest of us too?
I would love to. So it's pretty simple. It's called the Life Force Check-in and Receiving Practice. And this will take you less than 3 minutes, maybe even less than a minute and a half every morning. And I do this at the start of my day. I also do it as I wind down my day. And this is how you make sure that you don't go into the place of bankruptcy or having to get sick to be able to burn out, to kind of slow down. And the reason it works is I'm going to teach you how to take a life force reading. So kind of to check in on your level, your life force level. Your life force is your juice. If you were a cell phone, it would be your battery charge, right? So it's like your gas. So what a lot of us do is we wait till we get to the point of empty, or we're on fumes, or we're like, 1 bar before we actually plug it in, or we, refuel. This is not a good way to operate. One of the best pieces of wisdom I ever received from one of my acupuncturist that helped me break out of my burnout pattern was retain. So you want to retain, not drain your life force. And then that'll be the first part. And the second part of the exercise, receiving, actually helps you start to get in touch with what you actually need. Because part of the reason we're not getting what we need is because we're not asking ourselves. We don't know. Like sometimes I literally ask a woman, I'm like, so what do you need? They just look at me like, no one's ever asked me that question. I don't know if I've ever. This is going to also strengthen your receiving muscle. So go ahead and close your eyes. And I want you to just, first of all, just bring everything back to yourself by finding your own breath. So just see if you can trace your inhale and your exhale. We just had a pretty expansive conversation here. So just bringing all of your awareness into yourself. And I want you to imagine that your body is like a chalice. And this chalice has a beautiful cup, it has a stem, and it has a base. And the chalice holds your life force. And life force, something that you receive every day and it refills every day. And the rule is you never serve from your reserves. So if you start to serve from the stem and the base, that's when you start to drain and deplete yourself. And so we're going to just take a life force reading here on a scale of 0 to 100. Imagine putting a sensor into this beautiful chalice. Imagine, putting the sensor into you. I love the chalice because it also holds water and wine, 2 things I love to drink and enjoy, and it keeps us alive. The wine or the water does for sure. And just ask yourself, like just kind of check in on a scale of 0 to 100. What's your life force level right now? Scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being full, 50 being half, and 0 being empty. And usually whatever the first number is, that's the number we go with, and we'll check in a moment. But I want to give you the second part, which is to ask the question, what do I need to receive today? What do I need to receive today? And this is where you really want to tune into your inner wisdom. You might hear something, you might just know something, you might feel something. It just depends on how your intuition works. And if you haven't been connecting with your intuition lately, you might get nothing. It's okay. You just need to ask, just say, well, what would I love to? And just let your intellect answer what I love to receive today. And then slowly go ahead and open your eyes and I'll explain all of this. But first, let's go ahead. So I got 67. What was your number for life force?
74.
Okay. And I needed to receive just allowing things to flow is what I got.
Well, going with the water theme, it was drink more water. Mm-hmm. And it was, I felt like I saw me snuggling in blankets and taking a walk, which has been like a lifesaver for me during this time. The sun is shining bright after snowing, and it's time for some soul nourishing walking.
Exactly. So notice that none of our things cost money or require us to do anything different. And this is how it goes. So if you're 75 and above and you don't receive that day, you're not going to go into your reserves, but it's still always good to receive. If you're between a 50 and a 75, you need to receive, or you're going to start to go into those reserves, like into the 50s, right? If you're between I always said a 25 or 35 and 50, you need to change how you're operating that day because you're on the verge of burnout. And if you're below a 35 or a 25, you need to create some deep space because you're headed for physical disease or mental disease that gets stuck in your body. And so if you're below a 50, it's like people are like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, you just change how you're doing things differently. So you ask for more support. I dress differently. I work slower. I let go of meetings, like that kind of stuff. So you just do things differently. You don't have to do nothing, just do things differently. The lowest I've ever gotten since I started this practice is a 43. And I cleared that whole weekend off and only did things that were nourishing to me. And by the end of the weekend, I wasn't at a 70, but at least I was at a 57. I was above that reserve level. And I've done this every day since 2012. I do it with my team. Oftentimes before we meet, we'll do it just to see where people are. My partner and I do it every morning and every evening together. And then you design your day to make sure you receive it. And it helps you support yourself to give yourself what you actually need.
It seems so radical, but it seems also at the same point, like it makes so much sense. Why doesn't everybody do this? It's so opposite of our system. It's like the awareness, as you mentioned, it's like checking in with yourself, and checking in with your team, checking in with your partner. We just don't take the time to do these things. And how much better could we operate if we did something so simple, free, not time consuming as this? It's our habits. Like, I must know what's happening on Facebook before I get out of bed and then suddenly, like you said, you let all of that in, you open your energy field to everyone else's energy instead of checking in on your own. And it seems so radical, but it's so not. It's the most, it makes the most sense than anything else. I love this exercise. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And it's I call it a stay harmonized practice. It will keep you harmonized on the inside. And people I always say, don't mistake the simplicity for lack of significance.
That's a good one. I like that. This is just like one of the many pieces of wisdom you have to offer. You offer amazing exercises and things to consider and things to shift in Overwhelmed and Over It. So this book can be purchased anywhere people buy books, correct?
Yes, it can. Amazon and IndieBound and all kinds of different things. Absolutely.
And you mentioned you have some New Year groups coming up. There's various ways to work with you online. And I know that there's a great need for your work. How can people reach you?
Well, to get the book, the best place to go is overwhelmedandoverit.com because it'll take you and that actually takes you to my website too. It's easy to remember. So you can go there and it has all the links to where you can buy the book at and a book trailer. And my website is Christine Arylo, Arylo. So that's a good way to connect with me. Every year in December, I do an annual year-end reflection ritual and power pause. And so that'll be on December 20th this year. It's free and that'll be listed on my website. So you can get it there, or reflectionritual.com is usually where you can go. So that's a great ritual to do. People from all over the world do it. And yeah, we have a visioning process we start in January. We take the whole month of January to dream and to vision and to have space and really work in these natural cycles. And that's through my Feminine Wisdom School, which is Feminine Wisdom Way. And the best way to stay connected to me is through my podcast too. So the Feminine Power Time. I love it. I've been doing it for 4 years. I love this is why I'm, having this conversation.
Love it.
I used to, when my first book came out, I did a lot of TV stuff, and I just got it was so not fulfilling. It was 6 minutes of sound bites. And I'm like, we don't need sound bites. We actually need to have some real conversation. And so thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you for everyone that's, tuned in. Thank you for doing this podcast and for creating the space for people. And we're all in this together. And I know we can, I know we will recreate a world in which all people can truly thrive. And we each have a part, just our part.
This conversation has been so nourishing for my soul, and I can't wait to check out your podcast and learn more about your work, because you're leading this charge in so many ways. Your voice is powerful and it activates other voices. So thank you for standing in that truth and being so knowledgeable and being able to share with so many this wonderful gift where hopefully, we're on the road to shifting our culture and creating healthy, holistic, wonderful lifestyles. Because I think it's possible. We don't have to burn out. It's not necessary.
Well, I just got full body chills when you say that, and my intuition's kinesthetic. So whenever I get the chill,
I get it too.
The truth. That's the truth chill. So yes to that. Yes to that.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And everybody, please check out Overwhelmed and Over It.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.